what we've seen is corporations in sectors where there's, 3 or 4 major players have been able to kind of take advantage of the moment and set their prices higher. My name's Angella MacEwen. I'm the senior economist at the Canadian Union for Public Employees. In terms of the grocery sector or other consumer goods that people are buying, we've seen a lot of companies setting their markups higher than they had before the pandemic. We had been in a situation before the pandemic where interest rates were really low, inflation was really low. In fact, central banks around the world had been talking about they were really concerned that an aging population was going to bring us into a situation where we had deflation. So it was completely different before the pandemic. But as soon as there were those real supply chain shocks in the background, causing some prices to rise somewhat, these big companies, they felt comfortable padding that to some extent and kind of taking advantage of the cover that COVID-19 gave them momentarily. And they became very bold, I think, as that was successful, and they were making so much money by doing that they just continued doing it, because it turns out the policy levers that we have right now to do anything about that are pretty limited. So the government of Canada has, brought grocery store magnates forward to, come explain themselves. They've tried to cap prices in the telecom sector. That actually led to prices increasing in Saskatchewan, which is unfortunate. A better solution might have been to have a public option, to have a public telecom. So not only are our options limited, the options that our government and our central bank have opted to take have been counterproductive. So I think that has only emboldened some of these companies and still feeling comfortable padding the books and taking that extra margin, because consumers don't have a lot of options to go. If you're looking at buying food, it's pretty tough if all the grocery stores are more expensive. You don't have a lot of options. This was really extreme, I think, in 2022. It's a little bit less extreme now, but what we've seen is corporations in sectors where there's, 3 or 4 major players have been able to kind of take advantage of the moment and set their prices higher. So this was in oil and gas. We saw this in car companies, and there were some real things in the economy that were causing problems, like there were problems at specific oil plants, or there were shortages in the auto sector getting chips to build cars. So some of that was real supply chain problems. But then on top of that, we have this corporate pricing advantage. In the housing sector, interest rates have caused a huge problem, right? So the higher interest rates are, that feeds into then higher costs for mortgages, higher costs for debt, higher costs for rent. So rents are going up. Housing prices didn't really come down. Sometimes they'll come down, but they're not going up as quickly as they were. So if you're buying a house, it's still very expensive. And then the cost of a mortgage is a lot more expensive than it was before the pandemic. So those costs of buying a house are way more expensive for people because of interest rates. So price caps are something that could be very effective. Alberta has the worst increases in prices in energy because their energy is fully privatized. Other provinces that have public providers of energy have had much more stable energy prices. So that's a really effective option for some of those key infrastructure pieces. And then price caps, saying you can only increase it by this much every year, is useful. Another option that was popular that we discussed a lot was having an excess profits tax. So you look at what, say, the usual amount of profits were before the pandemic and pre-pandemic times, if it was like 2% or something like that. And if the company is now charging, their margins are increasing, so they're getting 4% profits, you would apply an extra tax on that excess profits, and that would discourage companies from doing that behavior at all. And it would do it in a way where you don't have to have the administrative cost of setting the price cap and figuring out what a fair price cap is. That might actually be a simpler solution. We did that during World War II.